Susan, it is wonderful to see you. Wow, it's been some time. We go way back to delegations that you would bring to the city of Ariel, where I was running the Ariel Development Fund and basically the international liaison for the city. I had the opportunity to meet with you and the groups that you brought in the Olive Tree Initiative. To the best of my knowledge, OTI is not operating these days, but you've moved on and you're now with Naamat. So, Susan, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who is Susan Seeley? What is it that you do?
All right. Thanks, Avi. It's great to see you too. It's been not super long since we last saw each other, which was fun in the States. And it's fun to have this history and to continue to be able to kind of work together and keep touch like this. I am now the National Executive Director of Naamat USA. Naamat USA supports Naamat Israel. Israelis that I run into in the course of my job or work or, just socially, Israelis all understand and know Naamat Israel. There are very few lives in Israel, particularly for those born and raised in Israel, where they haven't had some sort of affiliation or contact or association with our Naamat services. So briefly, Naamat provides a network of services throughout Israel, north to south, east to west, for Israelis of all backgrounds, Arabs, Jews, Druze, anybody who's an Israeli citizen. We have a network of 150 some daycare centers, several of which are extended daycare centers for families and children who are particularly at risk for a variety of reasons. We have a women's shelter for victims of domestic violence and abuse, and for people who need to have a restart and a recharge in their lives and get their feet on the ground and for a safe place for them and their children to be. We have technological high schools for students who may not be aligned necessarily with just the track of high school to IDF to college, and they have some sort of other training opportunities in different industries and I'm not saying that well, different skill sets. And then we also have two youth builds.
Go over the sentence, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We also have technological high schools where we provide training and education for students who need a different kind of track than they would normally get through just the typical Israel education through high school and then IDF and college. We've got two youth villages, Kanot and Ayanot, which have both boarders and then students who come from the surrounding areas. And here again, these are places that provide community. They provide educational opportunities. They provide. I will look to get into some of these anecdotes and share maybe some of the anecdotes and the stories that I have around what we do that makes Naamat so impactful in so many lives. But that broadly is what we do. And so Naamat USA, both Naamat Israel, Naamat USA have been around for 100 years. We're a legacy organization. We come out of the labor Zionist movement back in the early days. One of our claims to fame is that Golda Meir was once one of our leaders during her time in the US. And so we have Yichus there. And I like to joke and say,
Susan, I'm so sorry that I was coughing.
I know.
Go back to Golda Meir, right on Golda Meir. By the way, we have a family story where my mother hosted Golda Meir when she came to Stern College. So that's our little connection to Golda Meir. But please, I don't want to be coughing at Golda Meir. I'm looking for my water, which I'm not even finding.
Okay. All right.
Which is lovely.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I go back to Golda Meir. So 100 years. Start with 100 years.
Okay. So both Naamat Israel and Naamat USA are 100-year-old organizations. We come out of the labor Zionist movement. One of our many claims to fame is that Golda Meir was one of our leaders during her time in the United States. And I like to say jokingly, I think she went on to something else. I don't know what she went on to do after that, but she was important in the leadership of Naamat back in the day.
Susan, it's a great stepping stone for your career. If you're running Naamat now, I know that there may be some vacancies in the prime minister's seat coming up.
Yes, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. That's why I took this job. So Naamat Israel, used to be an acronym. Now we're kind of a brand name in Israel. We used to be, the acronym was Nasim Ovdot Umitnadvot, so working women and volunteers. And that gives you an understanding of the women who were involved in supporting other women, supporting understanding that women needed educational opportunities. They needed support in daycare so that they could go out and pursue their careers and their opportunities afforded them. It was that women who came to build the country. I mean, again, we're 100 years old, so that's pre-state of Israel. But the understanding that women who came to participate in building the state, building what it was going to become, shouldn't be left out of the participation and out of, just kind of relegated to kitchen work and all of the things that women were typically enjoined to do. And so women in the United States understood that, and they supported women in Israel who were taking on those tasks of building up the country by coming together in ways similar to other organizations, whether that was Hadassah or, Rotary Club for a more non-Jewish secular kind of understanding that I share with people who aren't necessarily from the Jewish community, where people would gather. Women were gathering and doing whatever they were doing. They'd host teas, or they'd host dinner galas and things like that. So it was also a social opportunity to gather with like-minded women who were supporting Israel and supporting the needs of Israelis, and to raise money to send to Israel. And we continue to do that today. We are transitioning somewhat to what you and I and other people in the nonprofit world might understand as a more familiar now kind of centralized national nonprofit model, where we have programming that's nationally offered, particularly these days of online programming, and people still are gathering as chapters, coming together to share holiday traditions or to, do events together, and bearing in mind that they are coming together to, just now we have a big fundraiser and a big need for our network of daycare centers, because there aren't sufficient bomb shelter spaces. So because as the population of our daycare centers has grown, unfortunately, in some cases, the occupancy, availability in the bomb shelters hadn't kept pace with that. So we've got a need for mobile bomb shelters, unfortunately.
Correct.
So, that's a big fundraising push for us right now, which is addressing an immediate urgent need for our daycare centers. So
I'm sorry for cutting you off, but Susan,
yeah,
I think this is a really an important kind of, I don't want to call it a pivot. I'd rather you tell me if it's a pivot or not. It doesn't really sound like an organizational pivot, but it is a great opportunity for us to maybe open up this conversation. We have an organization, a legacy organization, 100 years old, with all of the experience and having gone through literally generations of the evolution of the modern day state of Israel, from before the founding of the state of Israel till up until today. And Israel itself, as it is at an inflection point. It's asking itself, where are we going? People talk about the day after, but other people are talking about the day of today. And what does this look like? How do we grapple with the challenges that are already present, challenges that have arisen that either we didn't identify before or weren't aware of, or certainly hadn't even developed the way that they have? And so you give an example of the bomb shelters. I want to take a step back, just going back to October 7th, Simchat Torah, and the devastation. What happens with Naamat? How do you respond? What are your initial thoughts? And maybe take us through those first couple of weeks of the war.
Sure. So immediately our thoughts go to the places that many of us have been, the people who have been to Israel to visit our Naamat facilities and things like that. And right off the bat, we have three facilities in Sderot, for example. So one of those is a daycare center that has kind of typical families and hours and things like that. We have an extended daycare center that I mentioned before for particularly at-risk families, where social services are provided, and and those children, they have maybe an incarcerated parent, or there's drug addiction in their family, or any number of situations. So they're in those daycare centers from like 7 in the morning, possibly till 6 in the evening. They go home only for a meal and sleep, essentially, because the needs are so great. So, and then we've got a women's empowerment center as well in Sderot. So all of that, of course, as you know, that was affected greatly. We had bomb damage in 2 of our shelters in different places. All of these things, as a women's organization, we, are thinking immediately of the women who are being affected. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but I was honored to be a participant or an observer or a person who was bearing witness to the UN. There was so much, as we now know and understand more and more and more as the days have gone on, how much women and children were affected by the violence in ways that are unspeakable and morally reprehensible, and not a situation of war, but a situation of most horrendous kind of sexual gendered violence imaginable. And so I was honored in my capacity as the Naamat US executive director to stand up and be counted amongst the people who were, there's no ambiguity here. This is not a political situation. This is morally unambiguous, that we need to stand up and say this is awful and wrong, and needs to have accountability for the perpetrators of this kind of awful sexual violence. So all of that, of course, was revealed and came out and understood better in the subsequent days and weeks. But getting back to, as you say, in the immediate aftermath, of course, we have our partners on the ground in Israel. Hagit Pe'er, who's the president of Naamat Israel. Under her watch, there are 31 districts, Naamat districts, all letting them know what their needs are. One of the, I want to say the vice mayor, is one of the leaders of Sderot, is also a Naamat member and leader.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they did immediately was to figure out a way to get the families and survivors and traumatized people out of Sderot, out of kind of this nightmarish scene, and they took them to go stay in hotels in adjoining cities and places where they could look on gardens and have a way of getting out of the nightmare that the reality all of a sudden became. So Naamat people were doing that on the ground. We've provided IDF soldiers, women IDF soldiers, with like toiletry kits and things. Again, it's there's so much, and of course, far more than I do, being there yourself, but there's dysregulation. I want to say people are experiencing dysregulation in their lives and their understanding, and particularly in those first days and weeks. And having these little things like a nice kit of toiletries, to say, okay, I can have something that's beautiful and something self-care and things like that, while I'm also dealing with the trauma and things like that. Our hotline, that we have a national hotline, our hours expanded on our hotline for people to be able to call that number and be referred either to mental health experts, or find where they could get clothes. We had a whole bunch of people move into our Ayanot village, our youth village. Both Kanot and Ayanot hosted a bunch of families, displaced families. So that was, something that we were able to offer. Ayanot is also hosting IDF soldiers because of the location, the proximity to Gaza. So in numerous ways, we were kind of mobilized and activated. And certainly our members here in the United States were devastated, mobilized. How do I help? And that's one of the things I've been really proud, and it's been, for me personally, what I felt like it's such a blessing for me to get up every day and go to work and know that I'm making a difference, that we're directly impacting people's lives in Israel for good. It's also been helpful because I've been so busy and focused on what we're doing that I can kind of ignore the news and all the chatter and the social media and all of that. I have other people kind of
Emotionally,
curating
yeah.
that, but it's really, I don't have time to sit there and,
The
doom
best
scroll.
therapy, the best form
Yeah,
of therapy is just making things better.
100%, right. So, and I've been proud to say too that people, our supporters and our donors, are making a direct impact. That their donations and their money, we set up an Israel Emergency Fund, unlike some other organizations where they're kind of a third party, that's going to eventually get the money somewhere. Our money is going directly to where it's needed, right on the ground. We
Well,
already have the existing network.
that's critical. Just to understand this from a macro perspective for a second. If we're zooming out, just to get a sense of where Naamat is, and you've got the U.S. organization and the parallel Israel organization, and Israel is on the operations. You've got your community in the United States. You've got the needs, your adjustment to those needs here in Israel. But I really love what you said about your ability to mobilize the community. And it's true, people wanted to stand up and be counted, but there is that kind of distance. How do you bridge that distance? In the end of the day, people are in the United States, and they are, fortunately, in your situation, it's an organization that can channel the funds that they're giving, and they can know uh, exactly what it's going to and where it's going to, and know when it's going there, and that kind of accountability on your part to provide that information to the donors. But what else is it that you've been able to do to create a stronger degree of engagement? Because it's challenging and it's almost paralyzing.
It is. So it's so important that our donors have an understanding through pictures, through videos, through contact with, we had our Israeli counterparts come on like a national Zoom and give us an update and an understanding of what's going on and why what Naamat is doing is making a difference. And we continue to deepen those I was going to say relationships, but those ways of engaging people and helping them to, if not be there, but understand the impact and understand what people are experiencing. And but getting back a little bit to the doom scrolling, because there's an understanding about the trauma and the horribleness, and that shuts people down. As you said, it's so overwhelming, and people, so there's also a need for the hope and the light, to get through, like an understanding that I am alleviating somebody's pain. It's measurable what I'm doing, and it's measurable that it's making a difference. And it's the throwing, I don't know if you know the story about the starfish all washed up on the beach, and they're all, they're not in the water, so they're all kind of dying in the death throes, and two people are walking along the beach, and the one man is throwing them, as he comes across another starfish, throwing it, and his friend is like, why are you throwing these starfish, and there's like hundreds of thousands, and they're all going to perish, and and he says it's not going to make any difference what you're doing. He says it makes a difference to that one, that one starfish. Just so, it's a similar kind of thing where people are feeling like I made a difference in that one person's life. But we, as the institution and the organization, have to be able to communicate that. Our social media I'm very fortunate to have fantastic staff who are really good at doing our social media, and that's helpful. I want to just give a shout out to something that happened just this past weekend on Sunday in New York City. A woman who'd been working with our women in Jerusalem at our Meshanot Center in Jerusalem, with women who are dealing with trauma and frustration and loss and pain and all that. She's been working with them through dance, the modality of dance and healing, and it's been fulfilling for her. She is excited about working with these Naamat women. She came to New York on a visit, and she has so many women who follow her and understand about how she's healing people. And so she offered a class in New York, and so many people showed up They learned about what Naamat was doing. They felt better. They got healing themselves. They're understanding how Naamat is contributing to the healing of people in Israel. It was so emotional. It was a big, I was going to say it was like a love fest, but it was also a pain, like sharing pain and sharing emotions that aren't always accessible. And through her brilliant way of having people move and be in tune with their body, they're able to access that. They're able to heal that. And also for us as an organization, as an institution, speaking as the, somebody who's trying to get that message through, that's how we're conveying who we are as Naamat and what our objectives are. I mean, because at the end of the day, we are bringing, that's our objective in Israel, is to have healthy communities, healthy families, healthy women. All of our services are oriented towards better societal health. And right now we're at the opposite of that. So yeah.
I'm actually reminded awkwardly, in a past life, I was actually an occupational therapist. I was the only male student in my year of the studies at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and we actually had a dance therapy course. I have to say that was the most awkward thing I ever had to do. Certainly going through OT studies, but yes, I think your ability to bridge things, and we've seen during this war and a sharp increase in needs of the community, in resources that have been poured into the community, and in the social activism of the people here in Israel who are really taking charge and stepping into the gap and doing whatever they possibly can. And I think there's actually something, as much pain as there are many, many, many opportunities to convey the inspirational stories. When we can get those three different elements, the pain of the needs, but the activism of people and the resources to align. Now, the challenge, I think, is those don't always align. Many times they don't. You have a unique opportunity because you, as an organization, you see both ends of the entire spectrum. I would refer to the organization, of course, as an impact agent. There's the donor who wants to give, there's the beneficiary who needs, and there are the people who are the bridge builders in between, and you're filling a number of roles there in bridge building and obviously in leading those initiatives. But I'm already, we're in 2024. The pace of the war has changed, whether we like it or not. We don't know what things are going to look like in the immediate future. We don't know what things are going to look like with Gaza. We don't know what things are going to look like with Lebanon, with Hezbollah. But we do know that we've learned a few things over the last several months. Where does that put Naamat as an organization? You're looking towards your 2024 plans. What kind of flexibility do you need to incorporate into your planning? What kind of things have you maybe committed to do more of, or perhaps even less of, to kind of reroute resources or programming? What does that look like for you?
Thanks for the question. So I neglected to say when I introduced myself that I'm almost 2 years into this role. And so I have also been learning a lot about our organization, about our planning and our goals and how we get there. And this, I'm also proud of our ability to not really pivot, but to kind of amplify the importance and the impact that we're having over these past several months. And going forward, I would say, for myself as a donor, as a philanthropist in my modest way, and then for me as an organizational head, it's kind of similar thoughts, and that is to have a better understanding of our of what a plan, like a donating plan looks like, and then also our plan as an institution. Our revenue, as we have come to understand, is heavily dependent not only on our wonderful contributors and donors and members and supporters, but also on legacy donors. So people who in the past have said, this organization and what they're doing is so important to me that I want to make that a part of my estate plan, part of my, legacy in name and in finances going forward. And that's something that we are reaching out to our membership with, that message. and it's really a beautiful, there are people who, you know, and our organization has been around for a long time. So we have a lot of lovely members who have been members and supporters for decades. I met with some women in Florida who have been a part of us for 50 years.
Wow.
So, you know, yeah. So, and to me, it's a missed opportunity if those people aren't thinking with this kind of legacy planning in mind, because oftentimes we'll get a lovely, you know, big check as people are kind of thinking, okay, well, I'm, you know, coming to the end of things and I want to, you know, to divide my assets, or to share my assets in ways that are meaningful to me. And the check, the one-off check, is lovely and helpful. But if you have a legacy plan and you're giving in a way that is recurring, your name is remembered, your family is you know, has that, your family is also being remembered, and we have a continuing relationship with your family members, and an understanding of, wow, my mother, grandmother, you know, really made an impact and continues to do so because of their forethought and their passion. And to me, that has just really risen to the top of our priorities. And again, you know, for people who are philanthropists or donors, to make, and I know you know all about these kinds of plans, you can make that kind of statement, that kind of aspirational statement with an organization that you care about, whether it's through a community, a Jewish community foundation or whatnot. And you can say, this is part of what I want my legacy to be. You're
Right.
not committing to doing anything, you know, immediately, but that also helps to build our communities and to strengthen our communities. And right now, we know how important that is for people to
Right.
step up and to say, use my name in your list of people who can be counted on for a Jewish future in this community, for a Jewish future, for my connection to Israel going forward. I
Right.
mean, now more than ever, we're seeing that.
So
Yes.
Susan, you're actually touching upon some huge topics, which we're going to have to get to back to on future interviews, because one of them is really legacy giving as an entire theme.
Yeah.
You know, the Kosher Giving book that I wrote and soon to be launched, very exciting,
Yeah. I'm
is
looking
really
forward to it.
focused on something that's a little bit more shared, where every donor at every level can be involved. And so we really focus on an annual giving plan, but not the legacy. Legacy is its own kosher giving theme. It's a
Ah,
philanthropic theme that's huge and needs to be explored. And so we definitely going to need to speak about that. I think one of the
okay.
things that you're mentioning, though, is really, really interesting, which is, again, I get back to this 100-year-old organization
Yeah.
that has seen so much of the evolution of Israel, but there's also something else, which is not just the evolution of Israel, but we know that the relationship between, let's say, U.S. Jewry and Israel, or Israel and U.S. Jewry, has been changing. It's often been volatile over the last several years alone. And it's really interesting to see how that's kind of reorienting at this point in time. And when you speak about women who have been involved for 50 years, I think there's so much there to teach younger generations that might maybe kind of shift gears or be more influenced to do so within relatively short spans of time. That may be true for their careers, and that may be true for their giving, and it may be true for all sorts of things. This continuity is just such an important message. And I feel like that's just it's another topic that we need to tackle. For this particular conversation, I want to see if we can bring this together with two kind of concluding questions. And maybe, Susan, your thoughts in beginning of 2024. The war is still raging, and there's uncertainty going forward. What advice would you give to donors, and what advice would you give to nonprofits?
Okay. For nonprofits, and this is going to circle back to something that you just talked about, just mentioned briefly, engaging like the next generation of philanthropic donors. It's so important that we hold on, sorry.
That's okay. We're good.
It was one
Engaging
of,
the next generation of philanthropic
yeah,
donors.
one of the things that I didn't somehow turn off. Sorry. Okay. Engaging engaging sorry, and it's a child. Okay, I'm pausing
You
so
gotta
you
love
can,
them. You gotta love them.
because
You have no
yeah,
choice. You have to
yeah,
love them.
okay. Engaging the next generation of donors, philanthropists, particularly now with all that is going on in Israel and our conversations as a community, both in Israel and the United States, the Jewish community vis-a-vis Israel, the next generation, to engage those younger donors. And I know institutionally, you said as an institution, organization, we're all trying to do this. We're all looking for ways to do this, and meet those younger donors where they are. And that's a whole another conversation as well, of course, what these
100%.
people
100%.
look like and all of that. At the core, however, they, like us, are feeling despair at things that they're seeing. They want to feel like they are making a difference. They are idealists. They're passionate about making the world a better place. In the face of that despair, we just had a fabulous online program called The Many Colors of Zionism, where we had 4 young women. We had as she says, born Orthodox Black woman, young woman, who is a social media educator. They all call themselves not influencers, but educators. We have a young Latina rabbinic student, Jewish, obviously. We had an Asian woman, Zionist, young, passionate online educator, and then a Persian Jewish young woman. All these women are
Wow.
Jewish, and yeah, and the
That's an
conversation
awesome combination.
yeah, it was a fabulous conversation, and their experience being online in these days, their relationship to Israel, their relationship to the Jewish community. And we continue to have conversations with those young women. I had a conversation with one of them that we did like on Instagram Live, and subsequent to October 7th, and where she's at and how it's affected her online conversations and things like that. So it's those are the people who are responding to maybe smaller donations, but more often, because they, again, it's giving them a way of feeling empowered in the face of so much that feels hopeless and helpless. So we're also connecting our older generation members with their younger counterparts in ways that are unexpected, because the younger ones, I think, don't realize that our older ones are so eager. We just had another in-person event with a woman talking to us about the diversity, again, with the diversity within the Jewish community. And our older members were fascinated to hear this, because some of them aren't really, that's not part of their day-to-day existence in their own Jewish communities. But the younger members showed up in droves because that is their lived reality. And the more diversity, people are showing up, affiliating with Judaism and Israel and Zionism in all sorts of places that are not so traditional. And that's, as an institution, we need to be in those places. We need to celebrate those places, amplify those places, and support them in their connecting the dots with their philanthropic giving, and how that can make an impact going forward.
That's amazing. It sounds like you've really taken a very creative approach. This is a time that obviously demands that creativity, but again, the continuity that you mentioned as well. Susan, it sounds like you and everyone, we really all have our work cut out for us. There's so much that needs to be done. Despair is a powerful word. It does sometimes feel like, the starfish, right? How many can we actually help? There are things that are collectively currently beyond us. As of this interview, there are 136 hostages that are still in Gaza. And we want to push the Israeli government, we want to push anyone we can and everyone we can to do something, but it's not really clear what we actually can do. And that's really, really challenging. It doesn't mean that we can lose sight of that. We can never lose sight of that. And at the same time, those places where we can have impact, it's just a greater responsibility. I feel like everyone's been really, really driven to act, to mobilize. You're 100% correct. It's the most therapeutic thing we can do, but it's also the most meaningful. And you spoke about measurable before. We speak about with KosherGiving, meaningful, mindful, and measurable giving. So really, Susan, thank you. Thank Naamat. Thanks to Naamat. Your U.S. organization, your Israeli counterparts, just keep up the good work. And hopefully the more you keep working, the more we'll move the needle in the right direction. So thank you, Susan. And I do look forward to speaking to you again about some of those other topics that we're going to have to tackle.
Great, Avi. I look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Stop recording. Stop.